Hi, Dina, and welcome back to the Eternal Self podcast. Great to have you here. Thank you so much. Uh,
To be here with you again.
Thank you. Thank you, Dina. Dina, last time in the podcast, we had left it at this very interesting junction where we were talking about accessing uh, knowledge from the other side, let's just call it something, some insights coming into you from a direct, like earlier people used to call it a download, but I personally think that's like siddhis. So I wanted us to just break down further because I think for decades or probably for centuries, people have been able to access higher intelligence. So, what can
Yes.
people do? What can people do to enhance that ability and use it for greater good?
So as one progresses along the spiritual path, in other words, as you continue to do your sadhana, a transformation takes place in who you are, and not who you are, because the eternal self is eternal self, but how you identify. Uh, uh, um, you begin to access abilities that were closed off before. And of course, this is a very tricky, the path gets tricky. Uh, I'll give you an example of that. People who read my books, they want to know how they can access memories of past births.
Yes.
Some of them there's one friend in particular who went to a past life regression. And she's told you with this, that, and the other thing. But if the memories are not within you, what good does it know? What good does it do to know, well, you lived here and did that? It's not really relevant for your current life. If something is relevant for your current life, then it will naturally arise. So that is one of the gifts I had was memory of my past, but there are all kinds of gifts. People can see people do astral travel. There are all kinds of possibilities of abilities that one can gain. But for me, it was useful because not only it wasn't just knowing that I was this, that, or the other person, it was understanding how karma works, understanding the law of cause and effect. And that's one of the benefits from seeing not just your past birth, but a whole history. You get to understand how this law works so that you can be more in control as you begin to create your future, as we moment to moment are creating our future. But to do it out of curiosity, I had another friend who went to past life regression and nothing happened. Nothing happened. So she was frustrated, but if nothing happened, then there's nothing you need to know. So I caution people about pursuing pa past life memories or other abilities out of curiosity. I know there are a lot of online classes now for remote viewing,
Hmm.
and I know there are a lot of podcasts of people who claim to do remote viewing, but you don't know if what they're seeing is accurate or not. I mean, I've heard, listened to people who say they had remote viewing of the moon and bases on the moon and all kinds of things. And so, how do you know what to believe? That's why I say it's very, very tricky, because you based on your level of spiritual advancement, that's how you can sort of assess the accuracy. And even at the beginning, when I began to recall my past births, I was very questioning. And I wanted to know, was my imagination interfering here? So I began to do my own sort of uh, um, research, and I looked at it as I was going to really look into. I wasn't going to accept anything on blind belief. I was going to go, and I actually went to the places that I saw because I had to know. I mean, there's a rational part of me that questions. And I think we all have that. We question our own experiences until we can receive some confirmation. And, eventually I stopped questioning because I received the confirmation that I needed. And I saw those aspects within myself. that from this life I still had that quality. From that life I had, so I'm an amalgamation of all I was before. So I think one has to approach this whole subject with caution and with a somewhat questioning mind.
Yes. So, Dina, what is like, say, for example, the greatest benefit of knowing where you're coming from could be that you know that your current life challenges are connected with something that you have done in the past for which you have no recollection of as such. But having that revelation helps you understand why you're having to go through a certain challenge and all that. So, that could really rest the soul to peace that I know I'm I wouldn't like to say I'm paying for my own karmas, but that there is a connection somewhere. So let's talk about first, Dina, how did in real life, how did you draw the connection like and how did it give us an example of what did you do with that information and how did it do something for you in this life?
Well, the information, you, for me, it was seeing the whole picture, not just one chapter. I look at each life as a chapter. And, I came to think of myself as having an unending life. So it's not just my past life. That was the previous chapter, and then there was a chapter before that. But it's a chapter in an unending story. And once you sort of grapple with that, the most important thing is that you are creating your future. You know, people struggle with why is there evil in the world? That's a perennial question. Why are certain people subject to suffering? When you realize that it's all through our own actions, you have to take responsibility. You take responsibility for your current situation because of past actions, and you have to take responsibility for the creation of your future. Nobody creates our future, but us. We ourselves create it. And that's a tremendous gift to realize that in a way, of course, but a tremendous responsibility because we do not realize the extent to which our thoughts and our actions and our words are creating our future. And to understand that it's very complex, how karma works. Because your situation could be the result of something that was done many lifetimes ago. It's not just, your previous lifetime. You could have had an aspiration for something that never got fulfilled. And so I mean, we're here to sort of finish all of our earthly desires and aspirations and correct our misunderstandings and sort of deal with all the things of the earth that we need to deal with so that we can graduate. We can move on to a higher plane of being. And that's the goal. Um, but it for me, I think the greatest aid for me was regular, steady meditation practice. Because there's nothing, and with a sincere effort, it's not just okay. I sat for 20 minutes today. I mean, it's a sincere effort to um, to pursue a particular spiritual path and to stick with it. And once you have your whatever your practice is, and it could be any of the practices, and you stick with it, you begin to see a change in yourself if you're coupling your practice with self-reflection. I mean, that's the whole point of the Mahabharata, the war, is how did I do on the battlefield of life today? The whole thing is about self-reflection, practice and self-reflection. How did I do on the battlefield of life today? And to look at yourself objectively. And then you find you're gradually becoming more of a witness. Now, the abilities that are so prevalently spoken about today, whether it's remote viewing or channeling, for some people that's an end in itself. And if that's an end in itself, that will be your end. You'll go no further than that. But it's very hard to know whether whether that's really enhancing your spiritual progress. Are you changing as a result of that? Now, I think there's a lot of beneficial channeling. I mean, I don't know exactly how to describe it. I mean, I get messages from my guru, I get messages from other beings, but they're not messages to proclaim to the world what's going to happen, you know. And there's so much of that contradictory of future forecasting, future telling. You
Yes.
know, this entity says this, and that entity says that. One entity says we're moving into higher age. Another entity says it's apocalypse. What do you make of it? The meditation is a grounding force. It helps ground you in the in what's real. You know, all you know is to go inside and connect with your deeper self, and to cultivate your intuitive capabilities so that you can discern. I mean, there's so much false narratives out there.
Yes. So why does this actually, Dina? I mean, obviously people are watching it, and that's why there's more and more of, some channeling through some aliens and UFOs and all of those things. And people are consuming all that because it's feeding to some innate human need of wanting to know the future. I think that must be rooted in uncertainty and fear. So, or why does the human, like, why do we have this need to know the future? If, like, why do we do that?
I mean, why do people love sci-fi films? You know, it
Yeah.
provides some excitement. Do you remember when that movie came out, The Secret, the book, and then the movie? That was a very, very big thing for a while. I mean, it was based on a truth about the power of the mind. The mind creates our reality, and the more focused and powerful the mind is, the more you can attract things to you. But you can attract things due to greed. I mean, people were praying. What were people using their mental powers for? Wealth, romance, earthly things.
Yes.
And if that's what you want, that's what you'll get. But how does that advance you? How does that help you progress spiritually? How does that make you happier? In the end, none of those things really are pathways to happiness. So, for people wherever you are in your journey, that's how you'll use these abilities. And people, yeah, there's a natural curiosity, right? So there's a natural curiosity about extraterrestrial life. That's a very big topic right now. The movie Disclosure Day came out, and I went to see it. I enjoyed it very much. But what do we know really about that whole topic?
Somebody else has told me to watch the movie. I haven't watched as yet, but
It's a good movie. It's a good movie, and I think that there's people are sensing that there's an element of truth in the fact that there are beings from distant planets. There's
hmm,
clearly a lot of life in the universe. Some of them may have visited here. It's
yeah,
very likely. It's very probable.
yes,
But that's all we can say until we actually see and know more. We can also say that it's very likely. That's what we can say. It's very, very likely.
yes. Do you not think, Dina? I mean, my personal take on it, like my assumption is that the people who we call god and goddesses, let's say Ram and Sita, even something so close to your heart, weren't they like beings from another planet who descended on earth, and we're some kind of a genetic mutation of those gods, or that they were extraterrestrial superior beings?
Or from another dimension, and not from another physical planet. My understanding is that they were from a higher dimension. So there's the physical world, which is the densest, but over with sort of in the same space, there's a huge astral world, and then there's a causal world, and the gods, what we call the gods, the divine beings, are at the highest level in the causal world, just sort of the first emanation out of the unmanifest. And they help order the universe. They help organize and order the universe. And then they they send out avatars or incarnations of themselves, not just to Earth, probably to many places where there's life, to help life evolve. And so those avatars sort of present themselves, in the case of Earth, as human beings,
Mhm.
but they're also aware that they're avatars of the higher dimensional reality.
Right. In fact,
You know,
Dina,
we're stuck with language and words which can't adequately describe any of this.
hmm, yeah, yeah. So, also, Dina, two things that were coming to my mind. First is, talking about the secret when you talked about it, in my own interpretation, what I deduced was that yes, the power of the mind can create things. I've done that plenty of times after reading The Secret and, understanding law of attraction. But then I also realized over the years that anything that I can create from the power of my mind is transient. It's going to last for a certain amount of time, just like any kind of image that you'll create on a projector, or an illusion that you'll create like a mirage, that would only be present for a little while. It's transient. So that's why I stopped playing around with too much of creating, because it's going to not be like, it's not eternal, first of all.
That's why I say it's not a path to happiness, to true happiness.
Yes.
If you really focus on attracting money and you attract money, you could lose that money. You invest it in the stock market, you can lose it. You want to attract a romantic partner, well, that may be a short-term relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, you 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 know you can use the most important use of the power of the mind is really to have right attitude about things that happen to come to you in life. You know, right attitude is so important, and to use the power of the mind. You know, like if you have an illness, to overcome the difficulties by using the power of your mind. Whatever struggles you're dealing with, if you're in a relationship, to use the power of the mind to have a right attitude. And there's nothing wrong with, if, you know, if you're struggling to get a job,
Yeah,
to using the
absolutely.
power of the mind to try to attract to yourself the right kind of job that will help you
Yeah.
fulfill your potential. So it's very important to develop. It's very important to develop the willpower, which is very linked to this, because how can you really go deep in meditation without without willpower?
Yeah.
You know, everyone gets distracted. Everyone is, you know, has experiences the urge to get up, you know, and say nothing's happening. I'm going to abandon this. But you need the power of the mind and willpower to stick with it. So strengthening the mind and strengthening the willpower are critical for spiritual progress. But it's the right use of the mind and not to get sidetracked. A lot of the things we are talking about are just distractions. So it depends upon what you want. Do you want the ultimate? Do you want to realize the self, realize the ultimate? Or do you want to play around in this field a little bit longer? If you want to play around in this field a little bit longer, you can embark on many distractive activities, distractions that will take you this way or that way, sideways.
Yes, beautiful. Tina, one more question that's coming to my mind. I have a curious mind. Fine. So the transient part kind of understood, and you beautifully articulated that if you want to play the field, keep playing it as long as you want. Then the question that came to my mind was then the eternal question of who am I? So is that evolution to understand who am I, or like, I want your view on, because everywhere, whether it's yoga is the union of self with the soul, the coming together. Again, Ramana Maharishi, who am I question. So is that the eternal quest to understand who we are? And what are we, if you could just also from your experience from, you know, across.
One of the greatest benefits of seeing your past is that question arises. Which one of those personalities am I?
Yes.
You know, I sometimes slip into my, even now as I'm going through my life, slip into my identity of my life just previous to this, the chapter just previous to this, because that's the most recent. But I'm not that woman anymore. And when I look back further in time, I see elements, but I'm not that person anymore. And so it's always startling to me when people refer to me from my one of my books as being such and such a character. And it's like, but that's not me anymore. And so this question of who I am, because Dena will just be another one of those personalities. In 50 years, when I'm in the astral world, Dena will be just another chapter in the novel.
Wow.
And I'll have some elements that I will carry over. Hopefully, it will be my spiritual efforts, my guru, but I'll be moving on to another personality. And that you can't avoid that question when you see that. When you truly see that you've had so many different parents and lovers and children and personalities and bodies, and that this one is just another one in a long line. And then the question is, who am I then? So I came to the conclusion I'm all of them, sort of like the amalgam, but none of them, because I'm not any of the personalities truly. I'm a spark of divine spirit that's playing in a play, taking on different roles for the purpose of fully awakening to the realization of that I'm just a spark of spirit, part of the whole.
Yes. Beautiful. Beautiful.
And so that's an eternal question. I still sit with that question because I'm still writing. I'm in the middle of another book now,
Wow.
and which takes place during the American Revolution in among the Iroquois people. And I'm very much in that personality now because I'm writing that story. And when I write, I very much get into that personality again. And I have to step back and say, what did I gain from that life? What is it that that life taught me? What did I gain from that life? And how do I fit that in with who I am now and then who I'm going to be next time?
Can you actually work on who would you be next time? Can you start um, ideating
Yes,
that
after I
now?
finish this book, I'm going to write that book.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that. Yes.
That's because time, what is time?
Hmm.
Time is a construct of the mind. The mind, in order to conduct the kind of, just like when you're in a play, you have to create all this kind of the scenery and everything and make it real. So we create a timeline, but there's no eternal reality. There's no real reality to time.
It's a human construct.
Human construct. I have been reading a lot of physics lately, the cutting edge of physics, and time changes as you go faster and slower. Speed of light. Time changes. Things speed up. Things slow down. There's no constant.
Wow. So can we fast forward things with the level of consciousness?
Yes. So how do you think sages see the future? Because they can project themselves into the future, just like they can project themselves into the past. And this was one of in Sita's yoga, I talk about that this was one of the abilities of Treta Yoga people. Treta Yoga people had the ability to sort of like supersede to transcend time so they could see more clearly into the past. Now, this is not everyone at that time because there are always people at different stages in their soul journey, but many of the people were at a stage where they could see into the past and they could see the future. So if they looked at somebody who was misbehaving, they could understand that because they would see their past, where that came from. They could also project into the future and see what that person will, where their journey will take them in the next life. So, can
So
you
then,
imagine if we could do that with people today? If we could see some of the rascals in the world today, understand what led them to become such rascals, and where their soul journey is going to take them to help them sort of undo some of the damage that they've done.
yeah,
It gives you a totally different perspective.
yes, yes, absolutely.
And that ability, I mean, that ability is within all of us. So, I once asked a yogi, about, the different yugas. He said, in every yuga, there are people who live in Satya Yuga, in the highest consciousness,
Yeah.
unity consciousness. There are people who live in Treta Yuga, there are people who live in a Kali Yuga consciousness, because it's both an external and internal reality.
Mm,
Kali Yuga consciousness is you don't see beyond the material, the physical. You don't know anything beyond the physical. And then you go into Satya Yuga conscious and you're in a state of unity with the divine.
mm,
So that, I mean, that exists at all times, although, you know, the yugas describe the general spiritual state of the population.
mm,
So, we're emerging from a period where people could only see the material. Everything was, they couldn't see beyond the material. But the veil is getting thinner. Many, many more people are developing the ability to see into the astral realm. That's why there's this prevalence of channeling and all that. That ability is returning to us. But the trick is to use it wisely and not to squander it or not to use it out of just curiosity. But that's a sign that we're progressing into a higher yuga where we can see beyond the material.
right.
And this is manifesting itself in our science with the quantum physicists who are talking about the quantum field now, which is conscious, a conscious quantum field, and the interconnection of all things and the multidimensionality of the universe. I mean, science is coming to this realization, which shows that we're beginning as a species to move beyond just perceiving the material.
Right. Talking about sadhana, when you talked about meditation, is your process of evolution, which I understand. Could there be a time when you start to feel that you are connected to some other source and you've surrendered to that guidance that's coming through you? And it's a constant process. One may start to feel that the dialogue within you no longer question, like, what is that source within you? What is that voice within you? Not the chatter of the mind, but there is another constant dialogue that is going on between you and yourself. At that point, is sadhana, sitting down and doing those rituals, are they even needed, or can somebody outgrow that stage even?
I'm not a big proponent of rituals. You know, in the rituals were developed actually in the Treta Yuga because the sages were losing the natural consciousness of unity, and they developed the rituals to help them regain that state.
Hmm.
And over time, those rituals became just rituals, tradition. And it wasn't for the purpose of regaining that unity consciousness.
Yes.
So I'm not except that I understand that for some people it's very useful. For some people there's power in rituals. I'm not one of those people. However, I don't consider meditation to be a ritual. I consider meditation to be a practice where you still the mind, which is just a chatterbox, so that you can get the vagus connection to the deeper self. And the chatter, the dialogue that goes on, the self tries to break through that chatter all the time, tries to remind you, tries to awaken you. But because there's so much chatter and busyness, and the 10,000 things that we have to do every day, it's very, very, very hard. Now, a fully enlightened person may not need to meditate. It probably doesn't need to meditate, but will often, I mean, the sages in the caves, they're in a meditative state because that's the state of unity with the divine. They don't need to be active in the outer field. They don't want to be active. They want to withdraw within and just unify with the divine source. So I don't consider meditation to be a ritual. Doing candles and lights and even mantras, although there's power in mantras. It's such an individual thing. For some people, they're very important and they're powerful, and for others, they're not.
Yes. I
I
meant
think the key is finding a routine that works for you.
Yes. I meant like not taking meditation as a ritual, but this whole idea of that at a certain time on a certain type of asana and this and the other, kind of, can there be a stage where you can be in meditation anytime, anywhere? You know how to withdraw yourself within, and you can be centered even in a very crowded place, and you can go within even in noise and in chaos.
I think ultimately, yes, but until we get to that place, it's very important to have a set time and a set place, where you go in order to withdraw yourself. Ultimately, yes, the sages can move through anything, and they're not disconnected. That's what Nibbakapa Samadhi is. You never are out of that state of unity, but that's not an easy state to attain.
Yes, yes.
It's lifetimes and lifetimes before you can attain that state where no matter what you're doing,
Hmm.
you're in the constant state of unity.
Right. I was thinking more of like Devni from Sita's Yoga, where she in her, if I'm recalling it correctly, so many times Dina, she was able to see, even with, like, she didn't have to go into meditation to see what would be the future of that person because of the karma that, it was happening and coming to her in normal life
It
also.
was Treta Yuga. It was Treta Yuga.
Yes, yes, yes,
It was Treta Yuga, so that was more easily accessible. But at the same time, she did a lot of practice as well.
yes.
It wasn't that she abandoned her practice, but the more you practice, the more you're able to maintain that state.
Hmm.
So, initially, even still, a lot of my recollections come to me in meditation, but they can come to me anytime. I could be walking, I could be gardening, and something will come through. The meditation is sort of like the fuel
Hmm.
that gets the fire going, and then it can keep going no matter what you're doing. But until you get to that place, I wouldn't recommend anybody abandoning meditation. But as I said, in the higher yugas, it was a more natural ability. It's still a somewhat rarity in our world today, getting more common. I mean, many more people have glimpses of their past than 300 or 400 years ago, particularly in the West.
Hmm.
And many people have written to me and saying, that reading the books has helped them get glimpses of their own past. So I think that is going to be, and my hope is, which is one of the reasons I keep writing, is that once this ability gets into the collective, it becomes easier for everybody. It's like the 100th monkey. Once the 100th monkey learns the technique, it spreads through the species. So the more people who can naturally access their past, and again, not out of curiosity, but in terms of understanding the laws of the universe, how it works.
Wow.
That's what we want to do, understand how the laws work.
That's an interesting topic to elaborate on, Dina. If for the next podcast, if we could go over some of the laws of the universe, that would be hugely beneficial for the audience and for me.
Let's leave that for next time.
Yes. Great. Any final words for this one, Dina?
No, I think you know, the power of the mind. We have powerful minds. We use just a minute part of our minds. And so the more we can develop our minds at the same time, develop our ability to use it or discern, to use it just for positive, beneficial ends. That's the other piece of the puzzle.
Lovely,
Okay,
Dina. On that
until
note,
next
thank you very
time.
much. I'll
Bye
see you
bye.
next time.
Bye
Thanks
bye
for now.
bye.
Bye now.